Heritage Trust's monthly talk series. The temples at Abu Simbel. I'm sure this rings a bell with most of us. Quite a few of us may also remember that these temples came under some sort of a threat in the 1960s, and then through a great international effort, they were restored and reconstructed. Now, going into slightly more specific details about this, these are twin temples at Abu Simbel, and they were constructed by the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II around 1200 BC on the west banks of the river Nile. They were kind of fitted into or dug out from the sides of an existing mountain. There are two temples here. The larger temple is dedicated to the sun gods Amun-Ra and Ra-Horakhte and are personified by Ramses himself. The smaller temple is dedicated to the goddess Hathor and is personified by Nefertari, Ramses' wife. Now, around 1960s, the Egyptian government decided to build their Aswan High Dam across the river Nile. And then they found out that this monument at Abu Simbel, along with a host of other smaller monuments, would be getting subjected to flooding and they would get submerged due to the construction of this dam. The Egyptian government at that time, frankly, did not have a wherewithal to handle the situation in any way. At that time, in a unique venture of its kind, for the first time, almost 50 countries from across the world came together and devised a project to save, restore, and reconstruct this temple at these temples from Abu Simbel. These countries not only provided the technical and financial support, but actually manpower resources were also provided. The temples were then cut piece by piece, part by part, and transported. They were moved about 200 meters inland and about 65 meters to a higher ground and reconstructed there. And this was a project that was unique across various parameters and can be considered a great success because once it was completed, almost all the critics and experts from across the world agreed that the restored project was 99.99% as good as the old monument. Now, I'm sure all of us are intrigued and curious and would like to know much more about how this project came to be ideated, planned, and executed. We are extremely lucky to have THT's own Egyptologist, Ravishankar to throw light on this subject. In his talk titled, The World Saves Abu Simbel, How a Multi-Nation Team Relocated an Entire 3,000-Year-Old Temple, Ravi will be not only walking us step by step through this project of restoration and reconstruction, he will also be giving us a brief history of Egypt and its religion so that we understand what is the hierarchy of gods, dynasties, and kings there, which will also enable us to understand how and why the temples at Abu Simbel were built the way they were and whatever happened subsequently. A very warm welcome to you, Ravi. We are extremely happy to have you here. Now, before we move on to the main program, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust, which is our organization, especially for the benefit of those who may be joining us for the first time today. Tamil Heritage Trust or Tamil Paramparya Arakattalai is a non-profit organization started by a group of like-minded volunteers almost 15 years ago with the explicit objective of understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating information related to India's history and heritage, not just for the academically minded or the scholarly, but the enthusiastic public as well. Towards this end, THT conducts various programs throughout the year. Chief amongst these are our talks and seminars. We have a monthly talk series, and as I already mentioned, we are in the midst of the March 2025 edition. We are extremely happy to say that this series has been continued uninterrupted for almost 14 years now by THT. We have merely changed the format from offline in-person talks to online through and post-corona. Another initiative of ours is called the Indology Festival and is an annual online event conducted in the month of June every year. We have 12 speakers who come across and use a conference platform and use their subject knowledge and scholarly experience to analyze a particular topic from various aspects. Page Kacheri is another initiative of ours, which is an in-person event conducted in the month of December to collaborate and corroborate with the Margari Isai Kacheris of Chennai. We are extremely happy to say that the December 2024 Page Kacheri, titled Tolliel Kapiam, drew huge audience and was considered to be a great success by both participants and the audience. We had focused on the archaeological expeditions in Tamil Nadu. Apart from our talks and seminars, we also conduct workshops from time to time. We have one-day workshops called How to See a Museum, How to See a Temple, etc., where anybody can register and participate. These are conducted in 2 sessions. We have a forenoon session of lectures and an afternoon practical session when participants are taken to the site to demonstrate what was discussed earlier. On and off, we also have classroom sessions on topics like the Grantham script, ancient Indian astronomy, ancient Indian mathematics, etc. Alamar Avai is another initiative of THT where the target participants are the school teachers of Tamil Nadu. Over a series of weekend lectures, various aspects of Indian history and heritage are analyzed and discussed, the idea being that these teachers further take them back to their students, further spreading awareness. Docent training is another initiative of THT, and we are extremely happy to say that the graduation ceremony for docent training version 2 concluded just earlier today. This is a training to prepare docents to present historical sites and heritage monuments in a professional manner to the enthusiastic audience. Another initiative of ours is called the Site Seminar. This is a largely in-house activity meant for our own self-education and self-enhancement. We zero in on a particular site anywhere in India, and our volunteers study the same in detail over 3 to 4 months. We have a number of in-house seminars, and then armed with all this knowledge, we go and visit these sites and experience them. In January 2025, we visited areas in and around Gwalior and Jhansi, which included, amongst other monuments, the restored monuments of Morena Vateshwar. From THT, we have also instituted 2 awards. The first award is called the THT Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award and is given to encourage and endorse individual contributions in the field of Indian history and heritage. We are extremely proud to say that architect Madhu Boteri from Hyderabad was the recipient of this award for 2024. The other award that we have is called the V. Venkaiah Epigraphy Award and is given for individual contributions in the field of Indian epigraphy. Named after V. Venkaiah, who was the first Indian epigraphist, this award has been instituted by Sunita Madhavan, his great-granddaughter. THT has been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this award. Our 2024 winner of this award was the senior epigraphist V. Vedachalam, who had served with the Archaeological Department of State Department of Tamil Nadu. We have our own YouTube channel, and you can find links to all our past talks here, including today's talk. You may subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to receive further notifications. These are our social media handles, and this is our mailing ID. You can mail us here, either to be included in our mailing list, or if you want to associate with us in under any of our events in a voluntary capacity. Last but not the least, as I already mentioned, we are a voluntary organization and we do not have any dedicated financial backing. So any kind of contributions are welcome. You can use this QR code or this address to contribute generously. That, in a nutshell, was about our organization. Now, moving on to today's talk. On the morning of October 22, 1968, Just before sunrise, the Abu Simbel rock-cut temple was the cynosure of all eyes. Yes, this was the new reconstructed, reassembled temple. While it had already passed its test with flying colors in terms of its external form, restoration, construction, etc., the main test was still awaited. Soon after sunrise, the luminescent sun found the entrance doorway and swiftly stretched its hands beyond it. Through the 64-meter long cave, the solar hands caressed and gently illuminated three of the four seated divine figures in the inner sanctum, as they had done for more than 3,200 years. Tears filled the eyes of everyone present. This is the picture which shows on that day how three of the idols were illuminated. This was an immense and meticulous international effort involving 50 countries that had successfully saved and perfectly relocated the Abu Simbel rock-cut temple, the crown jewel among Asian, Egyptian, Nubian architectural wonders, from permanent submersion in Lake Nasser of the Aswan High Dam. In his talk, Ravishankar will be focusing, as I already mentioned, not only on how the temple was saved through improbable international efforts at the height of the Cold War, but also tell us in brief about the various dynasties and the hierarchy of gods in the Egyptian civilization. A little bit about Ravishankar now. Ravishankar is a chartered accountant by profession. He retired as the general manager of the Housing Development Finance Corporation. His career took him to Guwahati and Hyderabad before he eventually returned to Chennai. Throughout his tenure, he led various departments, including accounts, loan processing, risk management, and IT. Passionate about history and heritage, his interests span from the Puranas to India's syncretic traditions. An active volunteer with the Tamil Heritage Trust for over a decade, he has in the past organized THT's monthly talks and the Pechikacheri series, as well as the V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award since its inception. Trained as a Malay docent, he was also one of the mentors for the latest group of docents. Ravi has delivered talks on Dr. Ube Swaminathan Iyer, the Tamil Tata, Islamic architecture of India, the stepwells of Gujarat, literature of Hoysalas, the inscription of the Chalukyas of Badami, the inscriptions of Kanchi, the Kaneri caves, and the Jain sculptures of Kazhumalai at various THT forums. He has traveled widely in India and a few countries abroad. And now coming to his chief interest, Egypt. Egypt has fascinated him since childhood. He fondly remembers writing about the Rosetta Stone in a manuscript magazine run by his younger brother, and thus began his dream of becoming an archaeologist, engrossed in endless accounts of breathtaking discoveries. Alas, these accounts turned to be more of the number variety, but his enthusiasm and interests in Egypt remain. In fact, a few months ago, he served as a docent on his first trip to Egypt, guiding a group of heritage enthusiasts from Chennai and abroad. Currently, he is teaching himself Egyptian hieroglyphs. Over to you, Ravi, to deliver today's talk.
Thank you very much, Gauri. I thank Tamil Heritage Trust for giving me an opportunity to talk about Abu Simbel and one of the greatest archaeological rescue operation of all time.
Yeah. If you go to full screen, that will be enough. Yeah.
The world saves Abu Simbel, the greatest archaeological rescue operation of all time. Let me first welcome you to Abu Simbel.
Welcome to the Temple of Abu Simbel. The facade is 24 feet long. Each of the statues of Ramses II is 65 feet high.
See, this is a movie. This is a movie clip taken from a movie called Death on the Nile, based on a novel Agatha Christie wrote in 1937. Probably the first fictionalized account which incorporated some of the important sites of Egypt, like pyramids, Karnak, and Abu Simbel. Having welcomed you to the Abu Simbel, let me in fact give you some brief about the Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel is about 280 kilometers south of the Aswan Governorate and approximately 40 kilometers north of the Egyptian-Sudanese border. From Cairo, it is 1,115 kilometers by road. Today, there are airports in both Aswan and Abu Simbel. The local called Abu Simbel Ipshek once. We don't know, in fact, what is the precise meaning of Abu Simbel and or how this name was derived. But according to a local legend, Abu Simbel is the name of the boy who guided Johann Ludwig Burckhardt to the monument in 1813. Even the Napoleon savants did not reach this place during the period 1798 to 1801. But in March 1813, Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, he just in fact discovered the treasury of Petra a few months ago on 22nd August 1812. He found the Nefertari temple and the top frieze of the main temple, but he could not locate the entrance to the temple. Burckhardt informed the Italian explorer Giovanni Battista Belzoni about his discovery, who traveled to the site but was unable to dig out an entry to the temple. But Belzoni being Belzoni, he returned in 1817, this time succeeding in his attempt to enter the complex. Belzoni is also an artist. So this is the painting which he did sometime in 1820. This is taken from a collection of paintings which he made during his stay in Egypt called King's Tombs in Thebes. And you can actually see the Temple of Ramses and Temple of Nefertari. These temples are situated, in fact, as you can see, are situated on mountain tops, in fact, or on mountains. There are two mountains, Mountain 1 and 2. It was a region, Abu Simbel. What is the significance of Abu Simbel? It was a region locals visited to worship Horus and Hathor, two Egyptian gods, revered in the form of two sacred mountains. Ramses II chose these mountains as the location for his temples. One of the mountains housing the Grand Temple was called Mount of Horus, the Lord of Meha. The smaller one was referred to as the Purified Mountain or Mountain of Hathor, the Lady of Ipshek. The larger temple is dedicated to Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, and Ptah, Egypt, three state deities of that period, and features four large statues of Ramses on the facade. The deified statue of Ramses is seen along with the other three gods. The smaller temple is dedicated to the goddess Hathor, personified by Nefertari, Ramses' most beloved of his many wives. Before we move further, let me give a brief account of the Egyptian mythology or Egyptian religion. As like any religion, there is a creator, and the creator is called Atum. Atum created himself and is the father of Shu and Tefnut, the divine couple, the ancestor of other Egyptian deities. I'm going to skip a couple of hierarchies of gods and goddess, and then go directly to Osiris, who is the son of Nut and Jeb. He is the god of fertility, agriculture, afterlife, death, resurrection, and vegetation. He is depicted as a green-skinned deity with a pharaoh's beard. He wears an ataf crown. He holds symbolic crook and flail. When his younger brother Set, who wanted his throne, cuts him up into pieces after killing him, Osiris' wife Isis finds all the pieces, joins them, wraps up his body, and revives him with the magic spells. Then Isis gives birth to Horus. Since Horus was born after Osiris' resurrection, Horus is considered a representation of new beginnings and the vanquisher of the usurper Seth. Osiris is also the judge and lord of the dead and the underworld. His wife is Isis, a major goddess in ancient Egyptian religion whose worship spread throughout Hellenistic period and Greco-Roman world. Isis plays a major role in Osiris myth, and the role is developed in literature from the New Kingdom to the Ptolemaic period. She becomes the most complex literary character of all Egyptian deities. As her cult grew, she absorbed characteristics from many other goddesses. She is also seen as nurturer and protector. She helps her son Horus to fight Seth and defeat him. Interestingly, you do not find neither the statue of Isis nor painting of Isis in Abu Simbel. Seth is as I already told you, he is the brother of Osiris. He is the god of desert, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners. Seth had a positive role when he accompanies Ra on his bark. Bark is nothing but a boat to repel the serpent of chaos. He was the lord of red land versus Horus' role as lord of the black land, the fertile land. He and his nephew Horus fight for the crown over a long period. I have already given a small introduction to Horus, so let me continue with the rest of the information about Horus. One of the most significant ancient Egyptian deities who served many functions, most notably as the god of kingship, healing, protection, the sun, and the sky. He was worshipped from at least the late prehistoric Egypt until the Ptolemaic kingdom and Roman Egypt. He was most often depicted as a falcon wearing the double crown representing Upper and Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt is the southern part of the Egypt. Lower Egypt is the northern part of Egypt because the Nile flows from south to north. So therefore, the south part is called Upper Egypt and the north part of the Egypt is called the Lower Egypt. Pharaohs, the kings, are recorded as manifestation of Horus in life and Osiris in death. Another very important god is Ra or Re. You can call him any way. Ra simply means sun. By the 5th dynasty, he had become one of the most important gods in ancient Egyptian religion, identified primarily with the noonday sun. Ra ruled in all parts of the created world, the sky, the earth, and the underworld. Believed to have ruled as the first pharaoh of ancient Egypt. He was the god of the sun, order, kings, and the sky. Ra was portrayed as a falcon, shared characteristics with the sky god Horus. At times, the two deities were merged as Ra Horakti, especially in Abu Simbel. Ra Horakti means Ra, who is Horus of the two horizons. When the god Amun rose to prominence during Egypt's New Kingdom, he was fused with Amun as Amun Ra. Let's see some pictures of Ra. On the top, you see Ra, in fact, traveling in his boat in the daily voyage across the sky, and another boat during the daily voyage in the night. And at the bottom, you have Ra and Amun. And on the another part of the bottom screen, you also have Ra Horakti, which is a syncretic god, the combination of Horus and Ra. Amun is known from the Old Kingdom with its wife Amunet. With the 11th dynasty, Amun rose to the position of patron deity of Thebes. Today it's called Luxor. Amun acquired national importance, expressed in his fusion with sun god Ra as Amun Ra or Amun Ra, Amun Re, Amun Re. After Ahmose of the 18th dynasty reunified Egypt to establish the new kingdom. On his own, he was also thought to be the king of the gods. Osiris and Amun-Ra are the most widely recorded Egyptian gods. Hathor. Hathor was a major goddess who played a wide variety of roles. As a sky deity, she was the mother or consort of the sky god Horus and the sun god Ra, both of whom were connected with kingship, and thus she was the symbolic mother of their earthly representatives, the pharaohs. She was one of the several goddesses who acted as the eye of Ra, Ra's feminine counterpart, and in this form, she had a vengeful aspect that protected him from his enemies. So, the eye of the Ra actually, in fact, serves as a Drishti symbol. Okay. Her beneficent side represented music, dance, joy, love, sexuality, and maternal care. And she acted as a consort of several male deities and the mother of their sons. Hathor crossed boundaries between the worlds, helping diseased souls to transition to the afterlife. She is portrayed, she is in fact with the horn of a cow and a sun disk and a cobra. And Hathor has a temple in Abu Simbel, a deified form of Nefertiti. The last but not the least is Ta, an ancient Egyptian deity, a creator god and patron deity of craftsmen and architects. In the triad of Memphis, he is the husband of Sekhmet and the father of Nefertum. He is also recorded as the father of sage Imhotep. Ta is an Egyptian creator god who conceived the world and brought into being through the creative power of speech. Ta is generally represented in the guise of a man with green skin contained in a shroud sticking to the skin, wearing the divine beard and holding a scepter combining three powerful symbols of ancient Egyptian religion: the vast scepter, the sign of life Ankh, the jet pillar. These three combined symbols indicate the three creative powers of the god: power, life, and stability. So these are the statues in the inner sanctum of Abu Simbel, and three of them are gods, and one of them being Ramses II himself. So in the screen, left to right, you have Ta, Amun Re, Ramses, and Ra Horakti. The next question will be, why were these Abu Simbel temples built? Why were these temples built? These temples may have been a form of political propaganda, some of the scholars believe. A strong message to the Nubians, who are actually today, the most of the Nubia is in Sudan. And in fact, Egypt had a love-hate relationship with the Nubians. Many times, in fact, the Nubians, in fact, worked with the Egyptian, and many times, in fact, Egyptians invaded Nubia or, in fact, attacked Nubia to plunder their wealth of gold. In fact, in Egyptian hieroglyph, Nubia is nothing but gold. The temples may have been built to thank the gods for victory from the jaws of defeat in the Battle of Kadesh. The Kadesh is supposed to be in Syria in 1285 BCE with the Hittites. In the Battle of Kadesh, the 4 divisions of Ramses II army were named Amun, Ra, Ta, and Seth after very important gods. There was also a 5th division of young recruits. The god Seth was considered a benevolent god under the Ramessid rulers, since their family and ancestor had adopted him as their protector. In Abu Simbel temples, it is possible that the audacity of the king Ramses II, thus playing the role of Seth, led him so far as to substitute a statue of himself in place of his divine ancestor. As you saw, in fact, when I was talking about the gods, in fact, okay, Seth was not a benevolent god. He was an evil god. He killed his own brother Osiris, and he fought with his nephew for the crown. So as you all, in fact, okay, will believe that, okay, Seth is a bad god, he's an evil god. But whereas during the New Kingdom, Seth's character changed and he became a benevolent god. Especially under the Ramses rulers, he was even elevated as their ancestor and their protector. Now, Ramses being Ramses, because he probably was one of the biggest narcissist king of the world had ever seen. So he, in fact, substituted himself in the place of Seth and put a statue of himself in the sanctum sanctorum of the Abu Simbel. Okay, let us see, in fact, who Ramses is. Ramses the meaning of Ramses is Ra has fashioned him. So the name Ramses has come from the word Ra. He was born around 1303 BCE. He was a son of Pharaoh Seti. Seti is also derived from the god Seth. You can see, in fact, okay, how the kings of the New Kingdom, especially the Ramessid kings, in fact, how they change the character, or how, in fact, how they change the character of the god Seth. At the age of 14, Seti designated him as the crown prince. He assumed the throne in his early 20s and governed Egypt for an astounding 67 years, from 1279 BCE to 1213 BCE until his death at the age of 90. Ramses II was first interred in KV7 in the Valley of Kings. His mummy is now exhibited in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, Cairo. Ramses II had 2 primary wives, and Nefertari was his most beloved. He is believed to have fathered over 100 children through his spouses and concubines, with an equal split between sons and daughters. KV5 in the Valley of Kings, Luxor, has more than 120 chambers meant for the internment of children of Ramses II. Continuing with Ramses II, the most powerful king of Egypt's 19th dynasty. Let us see, in fact, what this dynasty or the new kingdom mean, in fact. The scholars have divided the Egypt's historic timeline into various periods. And most prominent of them are Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Within the Old Kingdom, you have dynasties between 3rd and 6th, and you have kings under each of the dynasties. The Old Kingdom is known as the Pyramid period or Pyramid Kingdom. And this is the time when most of the pyramids in Egypt were built. There are supposed to be 130 pyramids in Egypt. Probably about 110 or so would have been built during this period. Then then comes, in fact, the Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom is known for its literature. Whoever studies, in fact, hieroglyph, he has to first, in fact, read the hieroglyph of the Middle Kingdom period, because that is supposed to be the most standardized, in fact, hieroglyph among all the periods. Then you have the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom is probably the most popular kingdom to the historians as well as the history buffs, because this is the time when large number of, in fact, kings as well as a queen ruled Egypt, and Egypt was at its height geographically, politically, culturally, and in terms of wealth. And you have people like Ahmose, Hatshepsut, Thutmose, Amenhotep, Akhenaten, even Tutankhamun ruling during this New Kingdom period. Ramses II belonged to the 19th dynasty. Now, what does this kingdom means? You have Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, but between these kingdoms, you have intermediate periods, and later on, you have late period and Ptolemaic period. The kingdom refers to the period when Egypt was united. Both Upper and Lower Egypt was united. These kings ruled both Upper and Lower Egypt, and therefore, in fact, they wore a double crown, indicating fusion of both Upper and Lower Egypt. Whereas in the intermediate periods or later periods, the kings did not, or the pharaohs did not rule the entire country. They ruled only a part of it, either Upper Egypt or the Lower Egypt. So that's the difference between the kingdoms and the other periods. And last but not least is the Ptolemaic period. And the most, especially for the modern scholars, this is the most important period. This is the period from which, in fact, we have derived all our knowledge of ancient Egypt. This is the period in which, in fact, the Rosetta Stone was carved out. And this is also not only Rosetta Stone, which is a multilingual and multi-scriptal stele, but also many other, in fact, stele like that. And many of the temples put up during this period have told the story of not only the Ptolemaic period, but also the story of the earlier periods. See, this concept of dynasties came from an Egyptian priest called Manetho. He wrote a book called Egyptiaca, or History of Egypt, during 300 to 250 BCE. And this book serves as a foundational text for understanding the complex history of ancient Egypt. For historians, even the modern historians, modern scholars, the book has played a pivotal role in establishing the chronology of the ancient Egypt. The concept of dynasties, which groups together a succession of rulers based on family, originated with history of Egypt and remains in use today. Okay, we'll come back to Ramses again. Each of these victories were, his reign began a golden age in Egypt, brought on by his successful military campaigns in Libya, Nubia, and Syria. Each of these victories were memorialized by new cities, elaborate temples, massive statues erected all over his kingdom. Many of his conquests have been documented on the walls of his Nubian temples. Among his many projects were the temples of Abu Simbel in Upper Egypt. Located in Nubia along the Nile River, they were carved out of solid sandstone rock. They commemorated a victory over the Hittites at Kadesh in 1275 BCE and also reminded Nubia of Egyptian dominance. See, Egyptians claim that they won the Battle of Kadesh, but the Hittites say they won the Battle of Kadesh. So we don't know, in fact, who really won. Now let's come to the temple itself. This is the plan of the Abu Simbel temple. And these are the four colossi of Ramses II. And you enter through a small vestibule and enter into the huge hall called Osiris Pillar Hall. There are 8 pillars, 4 on either side. And the walls of this hall are littered with the murals, littered with paintings depicting the many battles Ramses had fought with Nubians, Libyans, Syrians, and as well as Hittites. And you have storerooms on either sides. And then after you cross this Osiris Pillar Hall, you move to another hall with 4 pillars. And then you come to an antechamber. And after the antechamber, you go straight into the sanctuary, that is the sanctum sanctorum. And it is also called the Bath sanctuary because on a small stone stool or a stone, in fact, they keep a boat. So that's called, in fact, Bath sanctuary. Like we keep a statue, like we can keep a idol. They also keep the idol of the god on a boat. So that is called Bath sanctuary. And you have another plan of the Abu Simbel temple from the northern side. So you have the temple axis drawn here. And you have the colossi of Ramses here in the front. And this is one of the fallen head of the Ramses colossi. And this is the Osiris hall. And this is the another smaller hall. If you see, the temple, in fact, the width of the temple keep reducing. In one picture, you will also see the height of the temple also keep reducing. So this Osiris hall would be taller, and this particular hypostyle hall would be slightly lower, and this would be even lower, and the sanctum sanctorum or the Bath sanctuary will be much lower in terms of height. It will also be smaller compared to the rest of the space in the temple. This is the same scheme, in fact, followed in the structural temples of the Egyptians. Okay, let us look at some of the parts of the Abu Simbel temple. The Abu Simbel, probably the most prominent, most striking, in fact, of the whole Abu Simbel temple is its entrance. The single entrance is flanked by 4 colossal 20-meter or 66 feet statues, each representing Ramses seated on a throne and wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The statue to the immediate left of the entrance was damaged in an earthquake, causing the head and torso to fall away. These fallen pieces were not restored to the statue during the relocation, but placed at the statue's feet in the positions originally found. Next to Ramses' legs were several smaller statues, none higher than the knees of the pharaoh, depicting his chief wife Nefertari, his queen mother, 2 sons, and 6 daughters. And you have the facade behind the entrance. The facade behind the colossi is 33-meter high, that is 108 feet high, and 38-meter, 125 feet wide. It carries a frieze depicting 22 baboons worshipping the rising sun with upraised arms and steely recording the marriage of Ramses to a daughter of Hittite king, which sealed the peace between Egypt and Hittites. Below the frieze of baboons, names and title of Ramses, cartouches of his birth and throne name are etched. Above the entrance doorway, there is a bas relief image of the king worshipping the falcon-headed Ra Horakti whose statue stands in a large niche. And this is the entrance and the facade of the Ramses temple. So you have the baboons here, and you have all over this place. In fact, Ramses' names, both his throne name and the birth name, are carved here. In fact, each of the Egyptian pharaoh will have 5 names. One of the names, two of the names are the throne name, and that is given only when he ascends to the throne. And of course, you have the birth name. So Ramses is the birth name of the king, the pharaoh. And here you have the Ra Horakti standing. And here on either side, you have Ramses making offering to the god Horakti. And you have the 4 colossi here. And this is the head of one of the statues. And you have a very small, in fact, entrance compared to the size of this temple. And if you see the size, okay, in many, it in fact resembles many of the cave temples in, Mamallapuram, Badami, where the sides are somewhat, in fact, shaped like a slanted triangle. Of course, after 7 years of inauguration, an earthquake shattered the statue of the governor of the 2 lands, causing significant damage to the temple. But the small temple of Nefertari was not damaged. Several areas of the Great Temple were impacted, including the colossal statue of Ramses and the left pillars of the Osiris Pillar Hall. In response, Ramses tasked Passer, the viceroy of Nubia, with overseeing the repairs to rectify the damage. When I read this information, I am reminded of Taj Mahal. See, Taj Mahal was completed in 1643, and in 1652, Aurangzeb writes to his father saying that there are cracks in the mausoleum, cracks in the mosque, and cracks in the Mehman Khana, and there are seepages of water. So, despite, in fact, great care, these temples too get, in fact, damaged either naturally or by other reasons. After we cross the facade, then we get into the Osiris Pillar Hall, and the inner part of the temple has the same tapering layout that most of the Egyptians' temples follow, with rooms decreasing in size, height, and width from the entrance to the sanctuary. The hypostyle hall is 18 meters long and 16.7 meters wide. There is 59 feet long and 55 feet wide, and is supported by 8 huge Osiris pillars depicting the deified Ramses linked to the god Osiris. The bas reliefs on the walls of the hypostyle hall depict battle scenes in the military campaigns that Ramses waged. A stela put up in the 34th or 35th regnal year of Ramses II sheds light on the divine birth of Ramses, the purpose behind the temple construction in Nubia, and narrates the tale of Hittite king's visit to Egypt accompanied by his son. The most important part of the Osiris Pillar Hall is the northern wall. This is where the Battle of Kadesh, which Ramses claimed that he had won, is depicted. The entire northern wall of the temple proudly displayed the depiction of the Battle of Kadesh, a testament to Ramses II's valor in the conflict. This battle is a subject of extensive analysis in military institutions worldwide due to its strategic errors, intelligence operation, and battlefield tactics, etc. The strategic error that Ramses made was that he believed that the Hittite army is 15 days away from the city of Kadesh. but it was not so. They were just behind the city of Kadesh. They were sort of hiding. And he went inward without much preparation for the impending imminent attack. And somehow he regrouped and then saved himself from near defeat, in fact, certain defeat. The artist meticulously captured every detail of the battle, portraying the Kadesh fortress and the clash between the Hittite and Egyptian forces as the central scene, with Orontes River depicted meandering across the wall. Kadesh etched its name in the Hall of Fame of Peace Treaties as the world first recorded and surviving peace treaty between Egyptians and Hittites. Interestingly, the treaty does not refer to the Battle of Kadesh. You may think that, okay, the text of the treaty is inscribed in this temple, but it is not so. The text of the treaty is inscribed in the Karnak temple, Luxor. This is the scene depicting the Battle of Kadesh. I'm sorry if you are not able to make out much from this photograph. But the Battle of Kadesh is immortalized in the papyrus work. So if you go to Egypt, one of the most popular papyrus roll that you would come across is the one which depicts the Battle of Kadesh. So there are three parts to this, the papyrus roll. This is the first part, Ramses II making offerings to the goddess Hathor. She has a very typical cow horn and the sun disk on top of her head. And you have Ramses II in the Battle of Kadesh. He's riding this chariot called the Triumph of Thebes, defeating the Hittites. But Hittites see this very differently. As I said, Hittites don't accept that they lost the Battle of Kadesh. Probably it was like a draw between two strong armies. And here this part is where, in fact, God's Thoth and Horus blessing Ramses with eternal life. So they are actually pouring, in fact, some sort of a water of eternal life on him. Abu Simbel in a temple, from the hypostyle wall, one enters the second pillar hall. This hall gives access to the transverse vestibule, in the middle of which is the entrance to the sanctuary. Now we are coming to the sanctum sanctorum of the temple. It's also called the sanctuary. It is a most sacred space, reserved solely for the king and the high priest to conduct daily rituals dedicated to the gods. The ritual took place thrice daily at sunrise, noon, dusk, with the sunrise ceremony being the most significant. During morning rite, the chief priest opens a wooden sanctuary to welcome the sun. The rituals involve changing the attire of the deity from the previous day after ablutions and anointing the deity, burning incense, and presenting offerings of food and drink. Does it ring a bell actually to us, all of us? Even 3,500 years ago, in fact, okay, the kind of ceremonies that involve or this kind of rituals that surround a particular god is still, in fact, continuing in the modern day. Following these rites, the sanctuary is closed until the next morning. During noon and sunset, rituals were conducted without opening the sanctuary. The scenes adorning the sanctuary walls depict the king offering food sacrifices on the table to the sacred boards of the god Amun-Ra and the king himself. Statues in the sanctum. On the western wall of the sanctuary, 4 statues represent the divine entities to whom the temple is dedicated. From right to left of the viewer, you have Ra Horakti, the sun god, and ruler of Heliopolis, with a sun disk and a cobra atop his head. The deified King Ramses, portrayed wearing the blue crown kepresh. This generally the blue crown is worn during the battle. Amun-Ra, the principal deity and the ruler of Thebes. Thebes is nothing but your Luxor. Ta, the god of Memphis and the underworld, although his head is missing. The ancient Memphis is somewhere close to the modern Cairo. Notably, the temple's dedication appeared to center on Amun-Ra and the Ramses, as they are positioned along the main axis of the temple, extending from the entrance to the sanctuary. If you see, this is where the axis of the temple, in fact, lies, and you have Amun-Ra and Ramses II on either side of the axis. So the importance seemed to be on Amun-Ra and the Ramses. See, we have in India, we have kings who had given their names to the temple, but we have never seen a king, in fact, putting his statue or putting himself in the sanctum sanctorum of a temple. And here is Ramses. He's a very different person. Having ruled Egypt for 67 years, he could have done anything. But of course, there is also a custom of, in fact, gods and people being deified in Egypt. Especially the architect of the step pyramid, Imhotep, is worshipped as the god of the craftsmen. And this continued even during the later period, like, New Kingdom, even after New Kingdom. So deifying a king is not something, in fact, very unique, very different, in fact, especially with respect to the ancient Egypt. Solar alignment. Just about a week ago, we had this, on February 22nd, we had the first solar alignment of the year, 2025. It experienced, in fact, solar alignment twice a year on 22nd February and October 22. So if you are planning a visit to Egypt, probably you can try, in fact, planning it around this period and be in Abu Simbel on those 2 days. The sun rays shine into the temple sanctuary to illuminate the statues of Ra Horakti, King Ramses II, and Amun-Ra, except Ta. The sun rays align precisely with the axis of the great temple of Abu Simbel. In fact, I have shown this axis of the Abu Simbel temple, in fact, in a couple of my previous slides, illuminating the main statues within the sanctuary. The god Amun-Ra and Ramses II. This extraordinary astronomical event lasting approximately for 23 minutes. They say it starts somewhere around 6 o'clock and goes up to 6:25 or 6:30. Sometime it can even start a little later. And it draws visitors from around the globe. And Egyptian government, in fact, celebrate this phenomenon as a big festival. So they call it as a Nubian festival. So before and after the solar alignment day, you have a lot of functions during this period, a lot of cultural programs organized during this period. So the whole area is, comes alive during those 2-3 days. Previously, at the old site, the sun rays entered the temple on October 21st and February 21st, a shift attributed to alteration in the temple's coordinate resulting from the preservation efforts. Amelia Edwards was the first person to document this phenomenon in her book, 1,000 Miles on the Nile. What is the significance of this solar alignment? Abu Simbel, the place itself, has a rich history of astronomical significance. And they say the world's oldest astronomical instruments have been discovered just 40 kilometers northwest of the Abu Simbel in a prehistoric site called Nabta Playa. These ancient inventions, including a stone calendar and compass, were used to track the rainy season and determine the north. While some interpret the sun alignment with the temples as a symbolic of King Ramses II birthday and coronation day, but this remains a matter of debate. However, the ancient Egyptian placed great importance on astronomy and agriculture, with the alignment coinciding the onset of winter and summer. So the October 22nd coincide with the onset of winter, and February 22nd coincide with the onset of summer. Ancient Egyptians probably wanted to honor the sun gods Ra, Horakti, and Amun-Ra through the temple, along with the separate chapel dedicated to Ra Horakti. This interpretation is supported by the depiction of the baboons or monkeys on the temple facade, raising their arms in homage to the sun. But according to the Nubian legend, because this area is also called Nubia, a large area, the sun rays emerge from between two mountains east of the Nile. Gauri said that this temple is in the western bank of Nile, but it is actually on the eastern bank of the Nile. So, according to a Nubian legend, the sun's rays emerge from between two mountains east of the Nile, known as Masha Kid and Masha Kale, echoing the Egyptian legend of yesterday and today. The days of the sun alignment likely marked the planting and a harvest season, and the temple served as a cultural hub for Nubians to pay homage to the Egyptian deities. As I said, Nubians had a love-hate relationship with the Egyptian, and whenever they are not fighting with the Egyptians, they in fact adore Egyptians. They adore Egyptian in fact culture. They adore Egyptian deities. The temple also has 10 storerooms. These storerooms served various purposes: storing ceremonial tools, vessels during the daily rituals, housing the offering presented by the worshippers, storing the documents relating to endowments such as lands and slaves. One of the chambers may have been used by the pharaoh to change his dress or regalia before and after the rituals. As I said, the sanctuary, only two people are allowed, the chief priest and the king. Of course, in Indian context, okay, only, especially in South Indian context, in the sanctuary, only the priest is allowed. Priests are allowed, not the king. And Abu Simbel's importance is immense. If at all we are talking so much about Egypt, researching so much about Egypt, exploring so much about Egypt. And even today, there are hundreds and hundreds of Egyptologists. If you go to USA, virtually every university has an Egyptian department of Egypt. And this couldn't have happened but for Jean-Francois Champollion decoding the hieroglyphs. They say the cartouches, the copies of the cartouches of Ramses, written in a variety of ways from Abu Simbel, helped Champollion to test the methodology he had developed for decoding hieroglyphs. See, before he received them, he had already developed a methodology. And he wanted to test the methodology, whether his method will work in deciphering the hieroglyph. So first cartouche, or the first name that he applied his methodology, was the name of Ramses. The first royal name written in hieroglyph that he deciphered was that of Ramses II, which he officially announced to the world on 22nd September 1822. This is the cartouche of Ramses. What you see here is the cartouche of Ramses. This is Ra, this is MS, and this S and S. So there are two S. in this cartouche. And this is the temple of Nefertari. It's also a very interesting temple, but much smaller compared to the temple of Ramses. It's got only 4 parts: Hathoric Hall, vestibule, like you have a Osirid hall in the Ramses temple, and here you have the Hathoric Hall, and you have the vestibule, sanctuary, and chambers. The temple of Hathor and Nefertari, also known as the small temple, was built 100-meter northeast of the temple of Ramses II and was dedicated to the goddess Hathor and Ramses II's chief consort Nefertari. This was the second time in ancient Egyptian history that a temple was dedicated to a queen. But after that, there was no temple dedicated to a queen. In fact, even for Cleopatra, there is no temple dedicated to her. On either side of the portal are 2 statues of the king. These are flanked by statues of the queen. Remarkably, this is one of the rare instances in Egyptian art where the statues of the king and his consort are equal in size, 35 feet. The temple facade stands at a height of 12 meters and spans a width of 28 meters, featuring 2 towers. Each tower is adorned with 3 statues, 2 depicting King Ramses II and 1 portraying his wife Nefertari. Notably, the most exquisite statue of Nefertari graces the right side, presenting the queen adorned in a flowing gown and holding a sistrum in her hands, crowned with distinctive Hathoric headdress. That is, Hathoric headdress is you have 2 cow horns. Between the 2 cow horns, you have the sun disk and also a small cobra, in fact, sticking its head out. Additionally, 6 smaller statues representing the offspring of Nefertari and Ramses are positioned between the legs of the larger statues. King Ramses II etched a dedication inscription to his wife Nefertari between the second and third recess from the left, declaring that the monument is erected in honor of his esteemed great royal wife Nefertari, for whom the sun rises. It rhymes with for whom the bell tolls. Temple of Hathor. Compared to the Great Temple, the sanctuary is modest-sized chamber with a striking sculpture positioned on its western side. This sculpture portrays the head and hooves of a cow, representing one of the incarnations of the goddess Hathor. Beneath the cow's chin, the small statue of King Ramses is placed, leaving no room for statue of Nefertari. Flanking both sides of the cow, King Ramses is depicted offering flowers. The axis of sanctuaries of both the temples converge on the Nile. Like many ancient structures, they eventually fell into disuse, true to the theme of Ozymandias. Nothing beside remains around the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sand stretched far away. And this is how, in fact, both the temples looked in 1854. And this is supposed to be the earliest photo taken of the Abu Simbel temples. But Shelley, in fact, sounded quite gloomy, quite, in fact, dark. But then it was not. But the Nightingale, Florence Nightingale, we all know her as a nurse, in fact, okay, lady with the lamp. And we can't, in fact, imagine Florence Nightingale to be anybody else other than a nurse. But she has traveled for about 2 years in Egypt with her friends before joining the Crimean War efforts. And she traveled to the Abu Simbel and she writes about Abu Simbel like this. You look abroad and see no tokens of habitation. The power of leaving the boat and running up to the temple at any hour of the day or night without a whole escort at your heels. The silence and stillness and freedom of it were what we shall never have again. Nightingale, sailing to Abu Simbel, was overcome with emotion on seeing the beauty and splendor of the remote temples of Ramses II and reveled for a couple of days in a newfound freedom. This is how the temple would have looked when Nightingale visited this temple, because this particular painting was made sometime during 1845 and 1849, and she visited Abu Simbel in January 1850. So it's very close to the time when she visited. And really, this particular painting is one of the most beautiful painting of Abu Simbel. It's so majestic, it's so calm, so still, and actually, as if it gives you a unlimited freedom to emote and act. I want to recall her words again. The silence and stillness and freedom of it were what we shall never have again. But she also, in fact, ended little negatively. I don't know why. Probably she foresaw 100 years down the line, 100 years down the years, a new gigantic dam is going to be built across the Nile at Aswan. So I want to tell you why a new dam had to be built. In 1952, Egyptian revolution took place. The free officers movement led by Kamal Abdul Nasser and others captured power. They captured power from King Farouk. The new government, leaning heavily towards socialism and pan-Arabism, wanted to ramp up the pace of agriculture and industrial productivity manifold. The population was also exploding. More water and electricity were needed. The Aswan Low Dam on the Nile, built by the British between 1898 and 1902, was not good enough. Despite raising the dam's height 3 times in 1912, 29, and 33, annual Nile flooding continued to wreak havoc. Let me show you a small clip from the World Save Abu Simbel on the importance of the construction of the new dam.
The area in which this rapidly growing people can live and grow its food is limited to the narrow strip of fertile land on either bank of the Nile. Egypt's famous granary has now become too small. The construction of the Sadil Ali Dam meets a vital need of the people of the United Arab Republic. An enormous reservoir of the waters of the Nile will extend far south into the Sudan. It will be possible to irrigate much more land and greatly increase agricultural production. The vast new supply of electric power will help new industries to grow. Of course, the building of the dam has had its drawbacks.
The Aswan High Dam was conceived in 1954 to boost agriculture and provide electricity for the burgeoning industries. Interestingly, the Nagarjuna Dam also was conceived in 1954, and the Nagarjuna, the Nagarjuna University, the Buddhist relics were also about to be submerged due to the construction of the Nagarjuna Sagar. And this was around the same time this retrieval relocation effort was carried out in India. I think by probably 1960, the whatever they could actually excavate, find, and whatever they can move, they moved it to the higher ground in a island called Nagarjuna Konda on the river of Godavari. Apart from submerging hundreds of villages, displacing many thousand people, more than 20 temples, mostly several thousand years old, would be swallowed up in the reservoir Lake Nasser of the gigantic new dam. Lake Nasser is 35 kilometers at its widest and extends over 330 kilometers up into the Nile Valley in Egyptian-Nubia. Lake Nubia, its Sudanese counterpart, extends 170 kilometers into Sudanese Nubia. But in terms of capacity and area, 83% of the reservoir is in Egypt. Initially, Egypt neither had the wherewithal nor the resolve to save those monuments, but it wanted to document all the heritage that would be wiped out by the reservoir. What else is left to us, said one young engineer working on the Aswan project, but to drown the past to save the future. Let's look at some information about the submergence of Abu Simbel due to construction of Aswan High Dam. The base of the larger temple stood at 124 meters above sea level. The base of the smaller temple was 122 meters above sea level. The temples lay upstream. The Nile flows south to north of the old Aswan Dam. Of the old Aswan Dam, the water levels of the reservoir created by the old dam never exceeded 121 meters, and parts of the two temples were never submerged. But after the construction of High Dam, however, the water level would rise to 182 meters, exceeding the highest level reached by the waters of old dams by 62 meters and submerging the two temples completely. This particular picture would give you some idea about the submergence of the Abu Simbel temples. The green line perhaps is the high flood level of during the old dam days, and this would be the high flood level after the construction of the after completion of the construction of the Aswan High Dam, new dam. So this is the old temple site. So this temple, if this temple is not moved, it will be completely submerged by the waters of the new reservoir, Lake Nasser. So the temples had to be relocated 200 feet higher and 690 feet inland. So from here is the 690 feet from the former shore. This is the former shore of the temple, of the island, or the former shore of the Abu Simbel. So the saving Abu Simbel, the beginnings, Egypt wanted to document the temples and structure that would go underwater. They sought help from UNESCO. A lady called Christian Noble-Coup, the acting chief curator of Egyptian antiquities of the Louvre Museum in Paris, was sent by UNESCO as an advisor for the documentation project and a UNESCO advisor to the Egyptian. She begged to differ with the sentiments or the mood of the Egyptian government. She helped, in fact, Egypt to establish Center for Study and Documentation on Ancient Egypt for studying and recording ancient Egypt's history, arts, and civilization. In the same year, she reported to UNESCO that the potential flooding of the monuments of ancient Nubia by new Aswan High Dam was of immediate importance. She said, we have to save these Nubian monuments. So she begged to differ with the Egyptian officials. She appealed to the Egyptian officials, especially the Minister of Culture, not to resign themselves to this catastrophic loss of their cultural heritage. She said it was like preaching in the desert. I was constantly told, you are wasting your time. Why are you doing this? These are not even French monuments. But her unflagging optimism and resolution rubbed on the big man Nasser himself. So in 1959, Egypt and Sudan make formal appeals to UNESCO. Let's see, in fact, who this lady, Christian Noble-Coup, is. And this is the photographs of her. She is called also the Empress of Nile. She fell in love with Egypt at the age of 9, completely mesmerized by the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter in 1922. She vowed, studied, and worked to be an Egyptologist. All her life, Christiane Noble-Coux had fought against people who had tried to tell her what she could and what she could not. The world of archaeology then belonged to almost exclusively to the macho, rough and tumble men. Women were an extreme rarity. As a prominent female archaeologist in France, she had been shunned and harassed since her early days in the profession. In 1938, when Desiree Noble-Coux was named the first female fellow of the French Institute of Oriental Archaeology, an elite Cairo-based research center for the study of ancient Egypt, her male colleagues rose in revolt and refused to share the library or even the dining room with me. They said I would collapse and die in the field. She was a member of the French resistance during World War II. She was arrested by German army in December 1940 on suspicion of espionage. She refused to answer the Germans' question and scolded them for their bad manners. And rendered speechless by her insolence and unable to come up with solid evidence against her, they finally let her go. If she had been captured by Gestapo or SS, she probably may not have lived to narrate all these things. Probably German army was much more much kinder than the other two agencies. You don't get anywhere without a fight. I never looked for the fight. If I became a brawler, it was out of necessity. Again, coming back to the argument, drown the past to save the future, to her, the argument was nonsense. I was fighting for something that belonged to me as a citizen of the world and also for the honor of humanity. She was advocating nothing less than the most difficult archaeological rescue in history, a project of almost unthinkable magnitude and complexity aimed at moving the fragile sandstone temple to higher ground. Most engineering experts believed that no matter how much money was poured into the project, the temples could not be moved without irreparable damage. Of greatest concern were the majestic twin temples Abu Simbel and built around 1250 BCE and erected on a cliff overlooking the Nile by Egypt's most notable pharaoh Ramses II. The temple was thought to be as fragile and precious as the finest crystal. The enormous engineering problems were matched by the daunting challenge of seeking international cooperating at a time of escalating global political tensions. Of course, there were alternate proposal. One of the proposal was to build a clear fresh dam around the temples with the water inside kept at the same height as Nile. There would be underwater viewing chambers. In 1962, the idea was made into an official proposal. However, proposal, though acknowledged to be extremely elegant, was rejected. Yet another rejected proposal was to raise the two temples on hydraulic jacks. Now the UNESCO steps in. She told Nasser, "Let me handle it. I'll go talk to UNESCO on your behalf." After months of relentless lobbying, she finally won the support of UNESCO. A committee of patrons headed by the King of Sweden was formed. There were members from the royal families of Belgium, Greece, Monaco, Denmark, and Japan. F.D. Roosevelt, ex-president of United States, Andre Malraux, he was a writer, novelist, and also cultural minister for France for 10 years from 1959 to 1969. And Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan as Vice President of India, among others. January and February 1960, the Deputy General and Assistant Director, the Director General and the Assistant Director General of UNESCO made separate visits to Egypt and to Nubia. Each time, Nasser personally met them. So now, the official dam believed very strongly that this project can be worked out and that project has to be worked out. So he didn't want to go back on his dam proposal, neither he wanted to go back on the proposal of saving the Nubian heritage. To stir the world public opinion and interest, Egypt and Sudan invited representatives of mass media across the world to Nubia. Several diplomats and UNESCO officials also accompanied them. On 8th March 1960, the Director General of UNESCO officially launched the international campaign to save the monuments of Nubia. Appeals to the international community to generously help in cash and kind to save the heritage of humanity. Now, so far, the emphasis was mostly on Abu Simbel, but then after a couple of years, okay, the tone of the campaign changed. It not just in fact saving the Abu Simbel, but also saving the other monuments which lay across Nubia. The next map will show you the number of sites that would have been affected by the, or that were affected by the Aswan High Dam and the Lake Nasser. There are some Temple of Isis from Philae, New Kalabsha. There are so many of them, in fact. More than the counts vary between 20 to 24, 22 to 24. And this particular graphic, in fact, tells you how many structures were saved, how many structures were saved but relocated, and how many structures, in fact, are partially saved, and how many structures, in fact, got fully submerged, in fact. Some of they could not save all of them. Some of them they had to let go. So this is the picture of few monuments that were saved by the International Nubian Campaign. One of the most important, apart from Abu Simbel, was the Temple of Philae. In fact, this was moved from one island to another island. Abu Simbel was in the same vicinity, in fact. It just moved, in fact, about 200 feet, in fact, back and then 690 feet above. But here, the entire, in fact, temple was dismantled and then moved from one island to another island. Okay. And this is the place where, in fact, Indian team worked on a place called Afia. This is a place. So compounding the campaign's uncertainty was strong anti-Nasser sentiment throughout the West, which began with the 1952 military coup that brought him to power and ended de facto British and French control of Egypt. Nasser added additional fuel to the rampaging fire by nationalizing the Suez Canal Company in 1956 and other British and French-owned companies by 1957. Nasser's adamant refusal to ally his country with the non-Arab nations and his acceptance of Soviet aid were particular sore points for Western governments, including the Eisenhower administration, which not only refused to support the salvage effort but actively tried to prevent it. In 1960, the Louvre curator, that is our Christian Roche Nobulku, and her allies embarked on a public relation blitz to inform the world of the threat of the antiquities and to raise money to cover the astronomical cost of the rescue. The cultural minister of Egypt, Sarwat Okasha, writes in his memoirs about the meetings he had with the responsible authorities of several museums across the world. Many recommended, why don't you sell the doubles of antiquities? You have so much of antiquities still stored in the underground vaults of the Egyptian museum. Okay, they are not displayed publicly. Why don't you use the proceeds to finance the Abu Simbel salvation? His reaction was, should I sell the heritage of my ancestor? See, in fact, how the mood has changed. Initially, they said, in fact, we have to drown the past to save the future. But now they are saying that, okay, I can't sell my heritage of my ancestors. Special exhibitions were held in countries like Belgium, Canada, USA, France, Germany, USSR, Japan, Norway, Sweden, etc. Egypt, on its part, lent many rare and never been seen before exhibits from their collection. Tutankhamun's gold mask even traveled to France. Souvenirs and stamps were issued by several countries to elicit donations from private individuals. Fundraising, US and the world step in. Without massive financial help from Western countries, particularly the United States, the project was doomed. Then an unlikely savior, Jacqueline Kennedy, appeared on the scene. Just a few months after her husband became president in 1961, the new First Lady lobbied with him to reverse US opposition, that is, to reverse the Eisenhower Doctrine. Thanks to her influence, John F. Kennedy, in the nick of time, called on Congress to authorize enough money to ensure the rescue. Ultimately, 50 nations joined the United States in providing more than $80 million US dollar, not just to save the Abu Simbel, but to save the few 22 to 24 Nubian monuments. Also do a lot of, in fact, exploration, study, documentation, making the operation the greatest example of international cultural cooperation the world has ever known. Egypt and Sudan also contributed in equal measure. The US government alone, of course, there were also contributions from the private, in fact, individuals. There was also a trust or fund was set up, in fact, for the private individuals to contribute to it. But the US government alone contributed $18.5 million. India contributed in kind to the trust fund for safeguarding monuments in Nubia to the extent of $414,000 US. India deputed a team led by famous archaeologist B.B. Lal for exploration in Nubia. Here I have to say something. There is a documentary, in fact, made by student of Dr. Nagasamy called Dr. Rama Devi. She had made a documentary, a 30 minutes documentary on B.B. Lal, which was released in the month of January 2025. It is available on YouTube. You can go and see that. Governments of only 7 countries contribute more than India. This is probably one of the much, in fact, untold, unheard fact. Saving Abu Simbel and Nubian treasures. By the summer of 1968, the race against time had been won. The Abu Simbel temples, cut up into large blocks and reassembled like an enormous Lego set, had been installed in their new setting without one stone lost or seriously damaged. The same was true of the other smaller temples. The relocated Abu Simbel temples were inaugurated by a beaming Nasser with the justifiable fanfare on 22nd September 1968. On 22nd October 1968, the much awaited solar alignment also took place, and it exactly, in fact, lit those 3 statues which it was lighting before. So there's absolutely no difference in the way, the area of it lighting and then the time of its appearance. But they say it was only, in fact, delayed by a day. Before the relocation, it was on 21st February and 21st October. But post relocation, it was on the solar alignment started taking place on 22nd February and 22nd October. Egypt-Nasser was so grateful, he gave Jacqueline Kennedy and the US the Temple of Dendur, which now sits in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that is Met in New York. Egypt also gifted Temple of Debod to Spain, now reinstalled in Madrid. Temple of Tafe to Netherlands, now in a museum in Leiden. Temple of Elysia, it's a rock-cut temple. See, other 3 temples are all Temple of Dendur, Debo, and Tafe. They are all structural temple, but whereas this particular Elysia is a rock-cut temple. And this was given to Italy. It is in Turin Museum now. The whole campaign of saving 22 or 24 Nubian monuments was officially declared completed in 1980. So it took almost 20 years to complete the overall project. See, this is the scale model showing the original and current location of the temple. If they had not been moved upland, both these temples would have been under so much of water. This particular scale model is can be seen in Nubian Museum in Aswan. Let me show you a quick short video of how these temples were relocated, how they were dismantled and how they were relocated.
On is this: construction of a coffer dam to protect the temples from flooding while building work is in progress. The facade to be banked up with sand to protect the statues of Ramesses. Shoring of the interior of the temple with steel scaffolding. Removal of the rock surrounding the temple until a wall thickness of 2.5 feet is reached. Dismantling the temples in blocks of 20 to 30 tons and removal to a safe storage area. Reassembly of the temples on a site 200 feet above the original location. Restoration of the landscape.
So this is the artistic impression of the coffer dam. So the video said first they built a coffer dam so that the water doesn't come inside. So the beginnings of the relocation. November 1963, work on the project began with the construction of a coffer dam to prevent operations being hampered by the rising waters of the lake. The drainage pipeline was then installed to pump up seepage. Steel scaffoldings were erected to support the ceilings, sides, and colonnades of the monuments. The ends of the steel supports were padded with felt mats and plastic foils so that they don't damage the very fine and beautiful murals and bas reliefs of the temple. February 1965, the facade was covered with sand and topped with iron screens to protect them from falling boulders as the task of removing or peeling away the rocks above the temple got underway. The inner part of the temple now could be reached only through steel aluminum pipes just tall enough to let a person in. Rocks above the temple were removed with mechanized cutters 2.5 feet thick. Vibration and temperature were constantly measured inside the temple. This is the picture showing how this preliminary work were done, in fact. So here, they put a protection screen on top, and then they fill the statues, Ramses statues, with sand, and followed by a rock fill so that the sand does not fall away. And they built access tunnels here. So only through these tunnels you can actually go into the temple. And they built, in fact, scaffoldings because the rocks above the actual temple is being cut. Especially these areas, in fact, okay, the entire area is being cut. Just so they would leave only 2.5 feet above the temple ceiling. Once these operations had been completed, the work started on cutting the temples up into blocks. Every attempt was made to respect the integrity of the archaeological features and inscriptions on the 1,036 blocks of stone, which weighed between 7 and 30 tons each. The largest and heaviest of blocks were of the pharaoh's head. Engineers wanted to make few cuts as possible on the heads. The places where the cuts had to be made were covered with plastic foils. When the faces had to be cut, the work proceeded continuously, day and night, to avoid the crumbling of sandstone. February-March 1966, work on transferring the temples was completed. Custom-designed vehicles transported the blocks to two temporary storage areas as close to the new spots as possible. The last block to be transported was a mural depicting the union of Upper and Lower Egypt. So this is the plan how to cut the facade and the statues. So these lines represent that's the place where the cuttings are to be made, in fact. They were relocated at the top of the mountain with the same orientation so that they could catch the rays of the sun just as before. The cuts were joined with synthetic resins. The final phase of the reassembly of the temple was putting the faces together. These operations were finished in September 1967. Then work on the final stage began. This entailed the construction above each temple of gigantic domes capable of supporting the rock covering that was intended to make the mountainside above the temples look as much as possible like their original site. Work ended in September 1968 and the completion of the scheme was officially celebrated by a historic ceremony on the 22nd of that month. And this is how the new relocated temple looks like, in fact. You have a concrete dome because it has to support the artificial hill. And you have these facade blocks here. There is absolutely no change. So they used, in fact, stone, rocks, sand, even concrete mortar to make these structures. Okay, this is how, in fact, this cut blocks were moved. You can actually see this is a plastic foil which covered the cut area, and this is the dome that which was built over the temples, and this is the dome in construction. It's looked like a football stadium. This is the horizontal section of the Great Temple, and this is the it shows the re-erected facade with their supporting concrete structures as well as the surrounding concrete dome. This is the concrete dome. And what are the challenges, in fact, the relocation, in fact, entailed? The nearest city is Aswan, 280 kilometers downstream. Those days, in 1964 to 68, there is no proper road or railway from Aswan to Abu Simbel. It was connected only by Nile. Harsh, windy, desert climate and remoteness compounded the logistical problems. Consignments from Europe took 5 to 7 months to reach Aswan. Coffer Dam work had to be started even before the quarters for workers were constructed. The crest of the Coffer Dam was set 80 feet above the riverbed, but heavy rain in Ethiopia in November 64 brought water just 2 meters below the crest of the Coffer Dam. There were this entire in fact, project was carried out by Swedish companies. The consultant architect was the VBB. I mean, I don't know how to pronounce the full name of the company, but I would call it as VBB. There were other Swedish companies like Atlas Copco. If you go to the website of Atlas Copco, you can still see some information about the relocation of the Abu Simbel temple. Sandvik, and you have Sandvik Asia in India, Kansas Cement and Centab also took part. Because the temples were carved in porous sandstone, explosive could not be used to any greater degree. The stone masses above the temple roofs were instead removed with bulldozers. Atlas Capco one-man pneumatic breaker turned out to be a very useful tool together with the compressors and drills. The walls, roofs, and facade were sawed into blocks with hand saws from Sandvik, as power saws caused too much waste when cutting the porous sandstone. The cuts could not be permitted to distract from the appearance of the temples after reassembly. There were political challenges too. Egypt once wanted to do away with the UNESCO's oversight of the campaign. They say pride of the nation is at stake. We can do things ourselves. But then UNESCO, in fact, made a compromise, made some changes to the reporting hierarchy to respect the sensibilities of the country. Fortunately, the project, in fact, went on for 2 decades, and then whatever they said at the beginning of the project campaign's beginning, they completed it and celebrated that in a special ceremony in 1980. So finally, an ancient wonder was saved by modern engineering and international cooperation. So this picture is the photograph of Abu Simbel before the dam was built. So you can see the Nile so close to the temple. And this is the photograph which taken at night, and the Nile is so far away. So the relocated temple stands more than 200 feet higher and 690 feet inland from the former shore. Before I end, in fact, I started this presentation with the clip from a movie called Death on the Nile, which was taken in 1978. But I want to go a year earlier and show you some photographs from the spy who loved me. Okay, before I, in fact, conclude, I want to tell you very, very important information. But for this Nubian campaign, the international campaign to save the monuments of Nubia, the World Heritage Convention may have not been, in fact, made. And thus the system of UNESCO World Heritage Sites would not have come into effect in 1978. So the very, very important contribution of this entire international cooperation was creation of the World Heritage Convention and the system of, in fact, making awarding World Heritage Sites to various places across the world, various heritage monuments across the world. So as of July 2024, a total of 1,223 World Heritage Sites exist across 168 countries. Italy has the maximum 60 sites, followed by China with 59 and Germany with 54. India comes in fact 6th or 7th. We have 43 sites inscribed in the World Heritage Sites list. So as I said, in fact, before I want to conclude with a photograph of a film called Spy Who Loved Me. This was taken in 1977, probably the first film to have been shot in the newly created or newly relocated Abu Simbel temple. See here you have James Bond, Roger Moore walking. He's not walking into the temple, but he's walking across the entrance of the temple. And in fact, he goes to several spots, and then finally, in fact, he enters a cave. And after entering a cave, he comes across a switch, which he presses, a door opens. And after the door opens, he comes across a reception area, which is this. So this is the reception area, which is a reception area he comes across. So maybe, in fact, as I said, in fact, Ramses had the audacity to imagine himself as Seth and put himself among the other divinities. Here, the Spy Who Loved Me, the film had the audacity to convert a sanctum sanctorum into a reception area. Thank you very much. And I want to name some of the sources which helped me to make this presentation. The first and foremost is the article in National Geographic called Meet the Woman Who Helped Save Egypt Temples from Sudden Doom by Lynn Olson. She, in fact, wrote the biography of the Christiane Deschores noble coup called Empress of the Nile, the daredevil archaeologist who saved Egypt's ancient temples from destruction. Abu Simbel, Miracle of the Sun, a Kindle book, and UNESCO Courier. It's a magazine. I don't know whether they continue to publish it these days. The February-March 1980 issue, it was entitled Victory in Nubia. VBB, the consultant architects, in fact, after the project was over, they issued a small booklet called The Salvage of Abu Simbel Temples. And that was also very helpful to me. Many of the pictures that I showed you were taken out from that particular booklet. And there were also a couple of news reports which helped me to prepare this, and Wikipedia, of course. I took care to corroborate the information that I extracted from Wikipedia. And finally, not but the least, okay, UNESCO's archive film collection called The World Saves Abu Simbel, which was released in 1972. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Ravi. You want to close the presentation? We can.
Yeah, I'll.
Just give me a second. I think we have taken a lot of time, but still, let's spend at least. I don't know. I don't really want to take questions from the audience. We have. It's been quite a long session, but absolutely fascinating story. I know you had to spend a lot of time on the Egyptian gods, the dynasties, to give by the time you had taken more than close to an hour to come to the part where the dam was
Abu Simbel needed restoration.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to drop. I want to drop the section on the Egyptian god because I know that it's quite a dragging area. But I also had to, since in fact,
No,
I thought,
think
okay, because we talked a lot about the gods in the presentation, I thought it would be needed
to have an idea of who they are and why they are there.
No, it's absolutely important. And the timelines that we are talking about, when these temples were built. Only one point I want to add, which Ottusaivu Ramaswamy pointed out, that the treaty between the Egyptians and the Hittites may not have been the first peace treaty, because we already know about the Mitanni Hittite treaty, which is at least about 100 years older. Okay, and he seems to indicate that there are more. I certainly remember the Mitanni Hittite treaty. So let's just keep that away. But first, for me, one quick impression is that well before going to Abu Simbel, I had been to Alampur, where went through the Sangameshwara temple and realized that it had been completely relocated. From the, it was going to be inundated by the Sri Salem dam. And it was, and later we had, about our Shivanagi Reddy, who was given us lectures in Tamil Heritage Trust. He once casually pointed out that he was part of the team which was involved in actually moving it brick by brick and then shifting it to its current location in Alampur. Okay, and so were the whole bunch of other temples also in the nearby complex, which was also going to be inundated by the Sri Sailam Dam, and that has also been moved. And that is when I looked up at Abu Simbel and was totally, blown away. And it is great that, we all could actually visit Abu Simbel. So I'm really happy to say that, you were leading the tour and I was there, and Gauri was there as well. And we had a great time. The challenge, I still feel I can understand cutting the facade, all those mega, blocks. But how could they actually do the same to the interior, which is a chamber consisting of pillars, walls, and
Walls
ceiling
filled with
containing
carvings.
carvings and paintings? I still don't understand it. As in how that could be preserved so carefully and shifted without much of a loss. We don't know what the pre
And
and
what
the
is a
post.
rock cut temple? See, it's not a structural temple, it's a rock cut temple. So removing that
so
external stone, preserving everything, moving it.
No, you are not taking the entire external stone. Let us say that you take a certain amount of thin portion around, enough to manage the integrity of the blocks. But I'm still, I can understand that. First of all, the fact that each of those colossi had to be cut into, you cut the right in the middle and then you insert it. That itself, gives me goosebumps. How did they do that with all the paintings and the carvings inside?
No, it's very, I think, whatever material that I have read certainly does not bring out the complete extent of the labor, the planning, the effort of the people, especially the laborers, in fact, and the supervisors went in. See, they must have, it's an interior of a temple. It's dark because already the exterior had been closed with sand, and you have only a small, in fact, passage. In fact, you have scaffolding all around, right? So
And you can't be too slow or too fast. See, you can't be too slow because of the timeline.
limited. The space to operate is very, very limited. And in that, in fact, and it's going to be dark all the time, right from morning to night.
No,
And
also
how
that,
did they light it? How
Ravi,
did
as you
they?
said yourself, you can't be too fast because the sandstone may disintegrate or whatever. You can't be too slow because your timeline is also there. So you have to absolutely work at the right pace continuously like that.
I think probably, in fact, unfortunately, we don't talk about the laborers who were involved in that. They must have been really great artists, in fact, really great artists. See, it's very difficult to cut something, in fact, by hand saw in a straight line. I have used hand saw, but it's very difficult, very difficult. But then how did they do it? That too, in fact, a porous sandstone without crack. And even if the cracks had developed, how did they close it? See, when you look at the whole thing, they don't look as if they are reassembled one. And they have used, in fact, a lot of modern material to patch them, in fact, like, resins and etc.
No, even some dowels have been used. Metal dowels have been used. We saw some video there at that place. They have used some metal dowels, etc. Nothing is seen outside. It's a classic case of using modern technology and hiding it to highlight the ancient architecture building or whatever.
Yeah, when you go there, you won't get any sense that it has actually been relocated, right? But on the other hand, if you really look at Sangameshwara, it's actually been enhanced. I don't know what the original temple looked like, but ASA has substantially enhanced it. But here, when you showed the before and the after photo, other than the fact that, in the before, you had water coming so close and boats could come close enough, which is not possible today. The environment looked as if like even the sand, even everything looked exactly the same.
The shape of the hill, especially this landscaping, phenomenal. See, that's what, in fact, we did not see the temple of Phili in Ajilkia Island. Okay. In fact, as I said, okay, this was located, transplanted from one island to another island. And they matched the landscape of the original island.
Right.
So, and of course, as I said, the Nagarjuna Kota effort, though it is very small, something similar to what, in fact, okay, the Aswan project is. And I think it must have been completed by 1960. I don't know the timeline of the Nagarjuna Konda relocation, but I feel that in fact it was completed around 19. The Nagarjuna Sagar Dam was the construction commenced in 1954, almost at the same time as the proposal to build Aswan Dam was made. And I think by 1960 it was completed, or by, I don't know. So there were instances of, in fact, okay, relocation of the structures, the ancient structures. But this is something, the scale is really unimaginable. Probably this, when in today's, in fact, context, whether anything like that will happen again is very, very doubtful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we will have to close this session because there's so much that we can talk about, but it's 7:30 now, and you had a very long presentation. Except, there are plenty of congratulatory messages, both in the YouTube channel as well as on various WhatsApp groups. So wonderful job. Thank you, Ravi. Excellent work. And let's see how we can bring something similar in the coming months. Probably not immediately, but at a later time, a more gentle introduction to Egyptian religion, how it evolved, the gods and monuments of Egypt, which I think is a very, it could be a very interesting presentation. But this one had a very focused, specific purpose of a very important temple coming under the threat of modernity and dam being built, and how multinational effort was mounted to shift it completely intact. That's an amazing story. Wonderful, great work.
For me, in fact, the role of two women, the Christiane Noble Coup and Jacqueline Kennedy, was actually immense. In fact, but for them, this project would not have, in fact, materialized. In fact, because as you said, Eisenhower doctrine was very, very anti-communist and socialist, right? And the Eisenhower doctrine continued even during the Kennedy period, but Jacqueline Kennedy was she was so convinced that okay, this needs to be saved. These monuments have to be saved, and then she requested Kennedy, and then surprisingly accepted, right? And then it happened.
Yeah. Great, wonderful. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Let's meet again.
Next month.
April first week, first Saturday, with another presentation from Tamil Heritage Trust. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.